All right. So we'll just wait for some people to join. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
Yep.
sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, anyone in here in the that's currently an attendee, have you any of you guys you done pad split before, or do you have you done co-living rent by the room? Just curious here in the comments from you guys while we give people a couple of minutes to log in. Me personally, I've done co-living slash room rentals with varying degrees of success. Um, it's a little bit more operational work, but obviously the cash flow is better. So, but I think that's why I'm excited to have PadSplit working with us now because you guys take away some of that operational headache with the marketing and the leasing. And so looks like Yoni has three co-living properties. Ellen, hi Ellen, nice to see you here. Ellen's a colleague of mine. She's putting in an offer this week on her first pad split. Very exciting.
Oh, nice.
Not pad split, but I've worked with Oxford House, which is similar to Rent by the Room. Very cool. I also have a sober living home. Zoom user. No, you only actually have a management company that helps people run their co-living properties. All right, well, we're going to need you to remove yourself from this webinar because we don't want any competition here. This is all about pets. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Uh, and cool. Okay, awesome.
All right. Well, I can get started and introduce myself and then also introduce my colleague Andrew, who's also on this call. So my name is Suzanne. I'll be presenting, but before I start, I'll just share that I'm local. I'm based in Washington State. I joined PadSplit in January, and so I'm new to PadSplit, but I've been an investor in the Seattle area for over 10 years. On this call, I have Jan, who everybody knows, and also Andrew. Andrew is actually the head of market launch at PadSplit. So he's worked on successfully launching a lot of the different markets that PadSplit has grown into over the last few years. We're actually at 25 markets and still growing right now. So yeah, for today's kind of format, I'll do a presentation and then maybe at the end we can kind of just open it up to questions. So you guys can put your questions in the chat as they come up, but we'll leave it open for anyone who wants to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So I'll get started and share my screen. Okay, I'm looking for the settings. Just one second. All right, you guys all seeing my screen right now?
Yep, all good.
Okay. Yes. So my name is Suzanne. I grew up in Bellevue. I currently live in Bainbridge Island. I am a real estate investor who has a few multifamily properties, and I also have an adult family home. And I currently manage a portfolio of different type of housing real estate. And so how I got connected to PadSplit was I was just really curious about what other investors were doing and what are the ways that people are better utilizing their real estate to kind of get better returns. And so that's my background. I joined PadSplit in January, so I'm new to the company, and I'm really excited to grow the market here in Seattle. My role with PadSplit is that I work as a host advisor. So my role is really to kind of help people from getting started of understanding co-living, getting their properties onto PadSplit, and then helping investors grow their portfolio once they're on PadSplit. So PadSplit, what is it? What do we do? Where did we start? So PadSplit was actually founded in Atlanta in 2018. And our mission is to leverage housing as a vehicle for financial empowerment. So really what we believe in is that, housing is a essential need for people across the country, and more it's getting really difficult for people, everyday people to find housing that's affordable. And so really that's the, mission behind what PadSplit is doing. And we do it in a way where we make it better for, tenants and landlords as well. Um, so just to kind of see where PadSplit started and where we are today, we're in 25 markets across the country, and we're growing. We started and we launched in Seattle just a few months ago in January of this year. But we're continuing to grow kind of all along the West Coast. That's really been our growth recently in the last 12 months. So for this webinar, it's really specific to investors who are here locally in the Seattle area. And so, if we think about, you taking your time out to attend this webinar, watching what we're presenting, what do you need to know? What do you need to take away from this presentation? And so today we're going to talk about, one area that we think is a really great opportunity for real estate investors locally in Seattle. So what we think investors need to know is the workforce wave. And so really what that is this opportunity in housing that we feel like there's a growing demand for. So when we talk about the workforce wave, who are we talking about? Um, if we look at some of the largest employers in Washington State, you can see a lot of these big companies that have, a lot of different employees that are not necessarily making six figures. They're really trying to keep up with the cost of living, and at the moment they're really getting crunched. And so when we look at a little bit deeper into what workforce housing employees are, who they are, you can imagine that it's someone who earns between 35K to 52K a year. For example, could be a Boeing machinist, a Costco warehouse worker, your healthcare support staff, even Amazon fulfillment. And so for people earning income in this range, affordability is getting really hard. And so, they're looking for housing that might be priced at like 800 to 1200. And oftentimes today, they're really spending way more than that. And so we think this is really the opportunity for real estate investors to create housing in this price range. And what we're finding is that there's, growing demand for this. We also kind of look at the macroeconomics as, single childless men are becoming the fastest growing demographic in the country. And at the same time, by 2030, we estimate that 45% of women aged 25 to 44 will be single and child free. So this really kind of goes along with the lifestyle change that, more and more people are living alone. And at the same time, household size is shrinking. So, what does this mean for the opportunity for Seattle Metro real estate investors? This is really where PadSplit kind of comes in. And so this is an example of the PadSplit difference. If we bring it to sort of a single family house example, this example is like a 4-bedroom in West Seattle. So with a long-term rental property, you might be getting around maybe 3,495 per month. If that house is converted to a PadSplit and you add bedrooms, you could be potentially getting gross rent 6,300 a month, and that would be coming from individual rents from each of the people living in your household. So just to kind of, zoom back into like, what does PadSplit actually do? You kind of see the macro, you understand that there's a demand for workforce housing. Okay, what does PadSplit do in all of this? And so one way to look at what PadSplit does is we're kind of like the Uber, but for workforce housing, which means that, we really connect the hosts and we connect the members or tenants that live in our properties. We don't own the houses, we don't manage the houses. Similar to Uber, right? You could do this on your own. You would be basically cab driver, picking up people off the street. The alternative is, using technology like Uber. So really what PadSplit is doing is we're the software behind, what allows you to fill up your house and constantly have tenants in your property. And we help you manage the back end of like all of the things that would be required for you to manage that many different leases, that many different tenants. Um, so PadSplit didn't invent, rent by room or co-living, but we've created a system where we make it really easy and scalable for people who are doing this across the country in all municipalities, in every state. And so this is just some, ideas of like, what your dashboard on the back end would be like. What are you looking at when you look at your portfolio? What are you looking at when you are trying to check, which rooms are vacant, which, do you have people moving in and out? And at the moment, PadSplit is actually the largest room rental marketplace in the US. These are some of our listing partners that we list with. And so, you wouldn't only, if you put your property with PadSplit, you wouldn't just have it being shown on PadSplit's website. It would go to some of our other listing partners' websites as well. I like to share this slide because I think it's important to highlight that while PadSplit is a great opportunity, you can get more income for your properties. It may not be for everyone. And so when we really look at, historically who PadSplit works well with, it's really investors who are looking to scale. So if we focus on, a good fit of an investor who wants to use PadSplit, it's someone who sees co-living as an opportunity to grow their real estate portfolio. They might spend time, managing their first property, but then eventually they're going to delegate the management of the property to a team or a property manager. And they see co-living as a repeatable business, not just, like a one-time thing for one property that they plan to do. They're really looking at it as a model for them to scale their real estate. And so if we really look at the costs of PadSplit, this is one way to kind of get a very quick overview of how our fees work. On the left side, if you were going to do co-living on your own, you would be paying, a lease up to basically get a tenant in. And you would also be, paying for a lot of the time and energy that it takes to manage co-living. Co-living is different from long-term rentals or short-term rentals. And there is quite a lot of involvement operationally for you to have a successful co-living property. And so with PadSplit, what we do is we charge a 8% fee across the platform, and then we do have a 10-day booking fee. And so when you really look at it from a gross rent potential, you are making more money with this type of leasing strategy. You're making more than, for example, a long-term rental. And usually the fees will cover themselves when you look at it, in terms of operations. So this is my contact information. If anyone actually wants to have me help look at an individual property that you have, maybe you are thinking of changing one of your properties to a PadSplit, but you don't really know what the numbers are, definitely, feel free to email me, and you can scan this QR code and set up an appointment with me, and I'll be happy to kind of analyze your property and give you some feedback on what the rental income could be, and then what would, details that to make sure that it's a good fit for a PadSplit. All right, so I'll leave it up to questions from here, and I'll let Jan and Andrew jump in if there's anything you guys want to add.
Well, I'm curious to know. I mean, everything you've said sounds great, and like I love the idea, but I'd love to know about what are some of the more common difficulties that property owners run into when using PadSplit and when doing this kind of leasing strategy.
I think that's a great question. I actually think Andrew, it would be good to hear from Andrew because, Andrew's worked in different markets and he's seen PadSplit, I think, over the last, 4 or 5 years. Andrew, do you want to jump in and answer Jan's question?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing people may run into issues with is underwriting. So you want to be conservative with your estimates for weekly membership dues per room. You also want to understand, is the asset being optimized? So if you have a four-bedroom house and you put only four bedrooms on PadSplit, you're not going to make that much more than a long-term rental. If you have a four-bedroom house and you add three or four bedrooms to it, you're going to do really well. So just being clear on the floor plan and underwriting up front, does it make sense financially? Am I being conservative enough with my estimates that I'm going to be able to cash flow? And well set up pad split can cash flow anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 a month. If you don't set it up well and you only have four rooms, your cash flow is probably going to be pretty close to neutral when you take into account debt service and principal repayment. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be not making sure the property is everything is ready to go. So do all the outlets work? Does the plumbing work? Is the furniture that you put in there durable? Just the kind of the last miles we call it, the final setup of the property, was that done well? And if it's done well, it's going to reduce your operating costs, it's going to improve your member experience, and you're just going to have less work orders and things to go through. The next step would really be setting up the listing. So PadSplit members are only going to see the photos and the description before they book, and maybe a video if you include it. So making sure the photos look really good, the description's clear, it describes why you would want to move into the property, where it's located. If there's any major attractions or employers nearby, make sure to mention those. And then when you think about the overall setup of the property, pricing's really important too. Suzanne is an expert on pricing in the Seattle Metro, and if she doesn't know the area, she knows how to do the research. So making sure that coming back from the underwriting, your pricing set up where you're going to be able to attract members and also retain them. You may be able to get somebody to come in at a above market rate, but as soon as they find an option that's closer to the market rates, they may move out. So really optimizing that. And then the next piece is really operational. So do you have the right vendors in place? Do you have a good HVAC person? Or if you're using a property manager, do they have an HVAC person? And same thing for plumbing, roofing, etc. So having that vendor network built up. So if there is something that needs to be done at the property, you have somebody that you can get out there quickly, and then you know the quality they're going to provide. And this is something that I would, if you're in the real estate space, you can use many of the same vendors. If you're new to real estate and you're managing a pad split versus using a property manager, it's a good thing to spend a few hours, talk to some friends, and find a good vendor network that's in place to do work. And then when you also think about operations wise, the most important moment of the PadSplit members' journey is their move-in day. So when they're moving in, do they have the right codes to get into the room? And is there instructions so that they don't have a hectic move-in? They can just go into the house, get into their room, move all their things in, and everything's copacetic. And then ongoing management, the biggest things that members have issues with is responsiveness to maintenance ticket time. So can you respond to the maintenance tickets within 12 to 24 hours? And you may want to use a property manager if you're too busy to do that. Or if you're a larger operator, you may want to hire a virtual assistant. You can find those in a lot of countries that can kind of handle the communications and the coordination of any maintenance work that needs to be done. And then the final thing is really having either yourself, if you're self-managing, or your property manager, build at least a basic relationship and understanding with the folks in the house. You want to be clear about what your expectations are. You want to make sure that they have somebody to come to if they have a challenge with another member, and really just building that sense of community and having it be a collaborative environment. And if there are any issues or concerns that come up, you have the relationships in place where you can adjudicate those issues and be able to do that. And realize that's a long answer, but the beauty of it is that PadSplit hosts have solved all those challenges. We're able to coach you through it too. So don't be intimidated by it, but definitely do know that there's things that you need to get in place and policies that you want to adhere to just to have a good operating pad split. And then if you're scaling beyond two or three properties, I'd highly recommend getting a property manager. It does cost you a bit more money. Um, but at the end of the day, you're going to be able to have more peace of mind, and you can focus on what you love. If you love acquiring properties, or if you really like renovating and converting, you do the BRRRR, you can focus your attention on that, less on the day-to-day management of the property. And then I see a question from the Zoom user. Can you live in a pad split and have members? You can absolutely do that. If you wanted to rent one or more rooms in your primary residence, or if you had a vacation rental and wanted to rent out some rooms in that, you can absolutely do that. You will have to go through a background check process. Everybody that moves into a pad split has to pass the background check. But beyond that, you won't have to pay a fee to live there. And it's something that can be really enjoyable. You know, you get to meet people that are coming into your house, and you're able to build relationships that go beyond just the living environment in pad split. So another question from Ellen, are pets allowed? Pets are not allowed at pad split. We just don't think that having, you know, 4 or 5 people and several pets in a house, it doesn't usually work out very well. It does turn off some members that have pets, but at the end of the day, given our segment and there's not quite as many pet owners because there's a cost to owning pets. So I don't think it comes up too much and is too much of a friction point. Um, and then Yoni asked about or commented on ESA animals. So, given that we're subject to the same requirements as far as ESAs to other types of housing, be that apartments, single family homes, condos, you do have to allow ESAs. But at the end of the day, the ESAs have to meet a requirement as far as the behavior of the pet. So if you let in an ESA and they're not respecting the space and it's an issue, maybe they use the bathroom in the wrong place or they're barking all the time, you can have them move out, from my understanding, because the ESA, so part of what goes along with it is sure you can have the service animal or emotional support animal, but they have to have the behavior in place that continues to qualify them. And if they're not behaving and not respecting the space, then they're no longer really like considered an official ESA due to that behavior requirement being in place. And I think as far as ESAs, they can be a little bit problematic because there's not quite as much screening that goes into it. But a service animal for somebody that's blind or deaf, those animals are highly trained. I have a friend that has one, so I really don't expect to have too many issues with those. They're trained to deal with people, trained to deal with other pets, and then trained to, you know, respect the living environment and be a great resource for the person that needs it. So I wouldn't shy away from those. And then just making sure that you have documentation in place if you do have to ask somebody to move out that has ESA due to some of the potential reasons I mentioned. Um, awesome. So what are the one or two mistakes you see operators have? Kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but number one mistake would be not doing the underwriting correctly, and number two mistake would be not having the systems and people in place to manage the property, whether that's you or your property manager or your team. Um, and what are the disqualifications when it comes to a background check? That's a great question. Disqualifications would be a felony within the last 7 years. So if you had a felony in the last 7 years, you wouldn't be able to move into a pad split. And something to keep in mind is that there's 2 steps to the approval process. Step number one is becoming a pad split member. Step number two is being accepted into a property. So if you have a screening system in place, or if you wanted to ask additional questions or for documentation, you can do that after they request a book, and then it's up to you if you want to approve them or not. If they're an existing PadSplit member that's transferring from another city or another property, you'll be able to see their member rating and some information left by their previous host. So you can kind of use that information to understand, is this person a good fit, or is this person somebody that may not be a great fit for my house just based on their previous experience and actions when they were in a pad split.
I've got a question, Andrew. Are there amenities that you could add to the bedrooms to make them more attractive to potential pad split members, like a mini fridge or like a microwave? Or do you recommend anything like that? Have you seen people incorporate things like that?
Yeah, top amenities we've seen. So we have search filters on our rooms page, so you can filter for rooms that have their own bathroom, rooms that you know, have a walk-in closet, rooms that have additional amenities too. So we find in the filters, and we can share this data out with you. At the end of the day, the most popular feature is going to be a private bathroom. So if you're building for co-living, I recommend putting a bathroom in most, if not all rooms, and that usually gets you around a $50 a week premium per those rooms compared to a room that has a bathroom. And then the other common amenities that are searched are washer and dryer in the unit. Definitely recommend having a washer and dryer available, and you can have a coin operated or app operated where it's pay to use, but definitely having the washer and dryer in place. If you have an external entrance for a room, that usually gets about a $10 a week premium. Something that I wouldn't actually build an entrance specifically to get the $10, but if you have additional entrances, it makes sense to set those up so that the person living in the room has a way they can come in and out of the house. And then to touch on some that are a little bit more modular, mini fridges are popular, $5 to $10 a week premium. You don't need those, and you want to make sure your house has the enough electrical capacity to take on those additional mini fridges. But that's something you can do. And then desks and chairs are really popular, particularly if you want to appeal to the work remote community or people that have they're going to school or they have a need to sit down on their computer or with books and be able to do their information. So I think the desk definitely makes sense. And then the final thing would be the closet. So not every room, especially if you're creating it, is going to have a closet. I wouldn't actually create a closet, but what I would do is make sure there's adequate storage room for clothing and personal belongings. So you may want to go beyond just the basic requirements and have a hanging rod that's comprehensive. You can hang, 20 or 30 shirts on it, a dresser, and then maybe like a shoe organizer or rack. So invest a little bit of money, but just make sure that people feel safe in the house. That's definitely important. If you're in an area that's, a little bit rougher, I would probably put up motion cameras, lights outside the house. So if somebody approaches the house, whether it's a member or someone else, that it lights up and has that as well. And I can kind of could keep going a little bit, but at the end of the day, know who you want to target and know the property location, and then build your amenities based on that to work on, what may be a potential issue, and then what's an experience amplifier. And yeah, like I said, if you wanted to reach out to Suzanne and see the list of the most popular filters in Seattle, we can definitely provide that to you. And that way you have the data to understand what are people searching for, and then how can I meet that need and take advantage of additional demand and differentiate myself from other pad splits in the area.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Anyone else have questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. We got another one that says, how much is the fee to join PadSplit? I know you charge 8% ongoing. Is there any other fees? You only pay. I'm sorry, I'm just like I'm answering. You guys
No,
should
go
answer
for it.
web
Yeah.
based.
No, no, I
Yeah,
want you to answer.
you only pay once you're actually on the platform and have a tenant. So if you don't get a tenant and you don't set up and you're not leasing to somebody, you're not paying anything. So it's free to make an account and upload your property, and then you pay the 10 day, basically you pay a lease up fee, which is 10 days of revenue, and then you pay 8% ongoing after that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and on the kind of lease up, I think it's really good to clarify and highlight that, pad splits are really built for tenure. So we're looking at people that are living in this kind of housing and staying 6 months or more. So it's not like traveling nurses or midterm where people are kind of turning, regularly and they're only staying for 30 days. The idea is to really get people in place for 6 months or even longer than that. And we're seeing in other markets like that pad split has been established in that people stay for years, because once they're in a safe, clean house that's affordable, it's really hard for them to move and find a housing option that's, a better fit for them. So I think that's really one of the advantages is once you have stabilized your property, you really have less vacancy because you have these anchor tenants who are always there. You may have some turnover, so if you're managing, your properties well, that 10-day booking fee is really quite small when you look at it across, 12 months. Um,
Yeah, and we had a question around do we have enough people looking for rooms in Seattle? I definitely think that's true. We look at two data points. One's an external data point, how many people are searching rooms for rent on Google in a specific metro area. That's almost 7,300 searches a month looking for a room for rent. So we know the demand's there. And then on PadSplit, we've had, around 800 or 900 searches for a room for rent in Seattle. And keep in mind, we're not doing an excessive amount of marketing because at the end of the day, we have our 45 units. They've been booking up well. So as we continue to scale our supply, we'll scale our marketing efforts, typically listing aggregating sites and then Google search ads and social media ads. So at the end of the day, demand's definitely there. Could we have several thousand pad split rooms in the Seattle metro? Absolutely. And keep in mind, we're available in Tacoma and Seattle and the surrounding areas as well. So it's not just kind of one area. And I think in Tacoma, costs for housing are a bit lower to acquire. So if you don't have an asset, I would probably look in the Tacoma area or outerlying areas, and you should be able to find a deal that could work well. And if you have existing inventory in a more high cost area, Suzanne can take a look at it, but you could still do really well compared to other options like a long-term rental or short-term rental. How about dealing with drugs and alcohol in the property? Is there ever issues? So yeah, as we like to say, we haven't solved the people problem. People are going to do things that maybe they shouldn't do sometimes. Maybe they have too many drinks or want to smoke inside the house. So at the end of the day, we have membership rules in place that you present. You can customize your membership rules depending on what preferences you have. And then we have the member rating system. So members can rate other members. If somebody is being disruptive at the house or smoking inside in this example, they'll receive low member ratings from the host and from the other members, and that can cause them to have to move out. So at the end of the day, we have a lot less member issues than you could expect. I think it speaks to Suzanne's point around, hey, once you find a PadSplit property and you're in it, why would you want to jeopardize that opportunity? Because you're going to have to spend 20 to 50% more to rent your own place. And for a lot of people, it's just not in their budget. So, once you're in PadSplit, you want to make it work. And we have a support team. So if there was any, issues as far as safety wise, we can immediately terminate the member, and we have 24/7 member support. So we've kind of dealt with it all, but like I said, I wouldn't let that dissuade you. And I think having the relationships with the members, using the member rating system, and having clear rules kind of gets out in front of a lot of those issues. And if your question around, can I say no drugs and alcohol, period, you can definitely do that. You can put that in your membership rules. PadSplit, it does not approve of drugs. At the end of the day, some hosts, if they're in a state where certain drugs are legal, they'll say, hey, it's only outside. That's up to the host. But at the end of the day, you can set those out. And then the eviction process works the same as any other type of rental. You will, if you need to, you can file for the eviction. We have eviction providers that have experience with PadSplit you can use, or you can use your existing eviction resource. At the end of the day, keep in mind you're only going to be evicting one person from one room. So the other 5 to 7 rooms in the property are going to be generating revenue. And at the end of the day, how long does the eviction process take? It varies. But at the end of the day, if you use our eviction resource or read through our documentation and have an eviction resource that knows the intricacies of PadSplit, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And our evictions rate is significantly below the national average. National average around 7% of tenants will face an eviction filing across all types of real estate. For PadSplit, it's 2 to 3%, and we're working on ways to reduce that. And you also have the ability to offer a payment plan. So if somebody's behind, but you like them as a member and you feel like they're going to be able to catch up, you can do that too. So you have always control over if you want to or don't want to file the eviction, and we'll help you. And then Lee's question, how do you kick people out? So there's two ways that people would have to leave PadSplit. Number one would be a termination due to collections. So they're behind on their membership dues and you don't want them to stay. So you would give them a move out date and they would have to move out by that date. And then if you have an issue that's like, hey, somebody did something that was really unsafe in the house, like you're able to work with PadSplit support and you can set a move out date that's think 24 to 48 hours in advance. So you can kick those people out. And then as far as if somebody doesn't leave after giving a move out date, you'll go through the eviction proceeding. And PadSplit hosts can use what we call cash for keys. So if you wanted to offer, hey, if you move out by the end of the week, I'll give you $500 towards your next housing environment or next housing option, and you won't have an eviction on your record. That's something you can do and hosts do, but at the end of the day, how you want to handle somebody to move out from your property, we're going to support you, but we're not going to dictate how it is. And then the Zoom user, so in essence, we're following landlord laws. I think that's a good way to think about it, right? Where you're not able to just take somebody's door off or change the code so they can't get in. You do have to follow the system. And that's something that, hosts have done across hundreds of different jurisdictions. There's in Atlanta, about 50 jurisdictions we have a property in, and hosts have been able to deal with move outs and evictions in all of those places. And our structure and our legal team is very supportive. And if there is a challenge, we're more than willing to help and try to find a solution. Yeah. We got to keep the questions coming. We need a couple more. Don't hesitate. If you want to put it in the chat, go for it. We're happy to answer. And realize most of you are new to the platform. Do you have to own the property? That's a good question. So we do have some folks that will do lease arbitrage, where they'll lease a property for 3 to 6 years, and then they'll convert it to pad split and put it on there. At the end of the day, lease arbitrage is something that is a good solution if you have a limited amount of capital. But the key caveat being, if you're leasing it from someone, you want to inform them about what pad split is, what you're going to be doing with the property, and that way you just have that understanding set up. So if there is an issue or something happens, they're on the same page as you about how you're using it. And then in Seattle, how much can I get per room? So our average right now is around $230 a week for shared bass and around 275 for private bass. That's going to vary on location. If you're in a high demand area that's close to the downtown Seattle, maybe it's across the street or down the block from the Amazon buildings, you could probably get between 12 to 1400 a week for a shared bass. If you're in an area in Tacoma, a little bit
Uh,
lower.
4 o'clock, but the inspectors get there at 15, 20 minutes before.
Oh, I think somebody may have. Oh, okay. So, yeah, and if you have a property that's in Tacoma that's in a more emerging area, you probably will get 700 to 900 a week. And these are all good questions. If you have an address or you have a zip code, definitely reach out to Suzanne. Suzanne can give you an idea of what the weekly rates would be for a shared bath and a private bath. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be variances between it, but hopefully I provided a good range. Um, do you have a recommendation for bed and bathroom ratio? So the minimum is 4 bedrooms to one bathroom, and that's sort of the maximum. So you have to have at least one bathroom for every four shared baths. We really recommend 3 to 1. So if you have 3 rooms, they should just be sharing one bathroom, and it has to be a full bath, like, including a shower or tub for those folks. And I'd really recommend putting in a shower or a shower head. It's just a better experience for a shared housing environment. And at the end of the day, each floor plan is going to be different. We have some folks that are thinking about multifamily where they're going to be at 4 units and 2 bathrooms. Those work well. It's all about the underwriting. And then we have several properties that are between 7 and 9 bedrooms, and they have between 3 and 4 bathrooms. So it's really a modular system, and it's really about, is the property going to have a good experience? And then is it going to be financially lucrative for you as well? Um, and then if you have a business license to operate that, I don't believe you need a business license, but you would probably want to set up an LLC for your property just to manage any risk you have and have that structure in place. And then as far as utilities, utilities are included in what the member pays. So the membership dues are including utilities, Wi-Fi, and then the rent portion as well. So you have to expect that the utilities will be a bit higher than if the property is a long-term rental. You have more people using the shower, more areas that you need to heat and cool. So it'll vary by property and by what the rates are for the local utility providers. But that is something the host pays, and then that's included in the weekly amount the members are paying. Um, And then the question around cleaning. So that's an interesting question. For cleaning members' rooms, members are going to clean their room for their entire stay. And then for the common spaces, we recommend either every 2 weeks or every month having somebody come in and do a deep clean of the kitchen, the bathrooms, and any other shared spaces in the property. Question around recommendation for parking. So it's going to depend on the location of the property. If the property is near mass transit or is in a very walkable area, you probably don't need much parking, maybe a spot or two for call it a 6 bedroom house. A couple folks will have a car. But if you're further out from the metro and there's not as much availability of public transit, you probably want to have a parking spot available for each member. And when you think about it, parking can be on the property, on site, or it can be street parking as well. And if it's an apartment complex, a parking in the apartment complex. So it doesn't have to be a garage parking spot to count as a parking area. And you're able to load how many parking spots you have. And when any member's applying, they're going to let us know if they have a car or not. So if you have it set where you have four parking spots available for, call it 6 rooms, and all four parking spots are taken, somebody wouldn't be able to move in that has a car, so they don't overload your parking situation. And that's something you set up when you create your listing, and then when members are applying, they upload their vehicle too, and you're able to see on your host dashboard the different vehicles, their license plate numbers, so you can kind of keep tabs on if there's any issues with parking. Is this a registered vehicle or not?
Andrew, there was a question on Zoom user ask. I presume you have to have a business license to operate like a business.
Yeah, so I don't believe you need a business license, but that's a good question for our legal team. Each city municipality is going to be a bit different, so um, we can follow up with you on that. My gut instinct is you don't need a business license, but I want to make sure we do some due diligence and give you an answer for that. And
Yeah,
then
no, you don't. As far as I know, you don't need a business license to lease your home. If you're in the city of Seattle, you may Google RRIO, rental registration and inspections organization, something like that, and see what kind of rules and regulations and licensing is there. Now, look, I know a lot of people that own a lot of property. Is it all registered? No, but that's what the city does want. So just look into that for yourself, make your own decision, proceed at your own risk. But there are definitely some pretty pretty standardized requirements in the city of Seattle if you're going to be leasing any property.
yeah, thank you for that, Jan. Totally agreed that it's up to you as far as how you want to approach the regulatory side of things. Do you need a permit from the city to allow more people? That's a good question. At the end of the day, PadSplit structure, so we lease the property from you, and then we sign membership agreements with the folks that live in the house. So in the eyes of the law, you only really have one tenant, which is the PadSplit LLC. So if you want to file for a permit to allow more people, you can, but from our understanding, it's not something that's required. And then there was a question around rooms being furnished. Yes, all the rooms are furnished. Minimum furnishing requirements are an end table and a lamp, a bed and a mattress, and then a place to store clothing. And as I mentioned earlier to Jan's question, you probably want to add some more amenities from that, but that is the basic requirements. And then your question of why are rates higher in Tacoma versus Seattle? I think it'll probably be the opposite. Rates in certain neighborhoods in Seattle are going to be higher. And if you're ever interested in what the rates might be, typically pad split rooms rent for 65 to 70% of what a studio apartment goes for in that neighborhood. So if a studio is, $1,000 in a neighborhood, you could expect to generate 650 to 700 a month from that room. And then, if the membership dues would be higher if the studio rate's higher than that. So, good way to kind of think about it. And we have a pricing recommendation for every zip code and every property that you can use to help guide your decision making. And then, how do you deal with people bringing bed bugs and roaches? At the end of the day, I don't think this happens too often. But it is a risk, and how you would deal with it would be mitigate it through a pest control provider. At the end of the day, it's something that can happen in any rental property. It's not specific just to PadSplit.
And I'll just maybe add one note of that, being a multifamily investor who has long-term rentals, one great thing about PadSplit is that because you as the landlord have access to the public areas, you have better eyes on your property because you actually can go in there, you can see sort of how the kitchen and common areas are being maintained. So it's different from like a long-term rental where you may not see your property for 12 months or even longer, and then you go in and you have this huge surprise. Not only that, it's like, in terms of maintenance or things that, your tenant maybe never reported to you, you have a better way to kind of see and make sure that your property is being maintained over time. And so I think those are really good points, just for someone who's kind of been in different type of leasing strategies. That's one of the benefits of having a pad split is it's reduced vacancy to turnover too. Because, sometimes a turnover can take, even a couple months, right? If the property's really been destroyed. So like I think that's another piece that, isn't really maybe always kind of in your underwriting, but it's one of the reasons why your vacancy will be less over time is just because you do have tenants kind of going in and out and you've got better eyes on your property.
Agreed. Yeah.
Do we miss any I think there was a question. Mike Basket asked, what's the average turnover or vacancy rate that we see? So that kind of on that vacancy question, Andrew, do you have a good answer for on average, I guess, what we see?
Yeah, so in a new market, we target around 80 to 90% occupancy. So that's going to include properties that may have a room inactive or properties that have not done as well with their pricing and listing. So if you set up your pricing and listing well and have a well operating system, you can probably achieve 90% occupancy, maybe even 95%. And then as far as tenure, so our tenure nationwide is around 7 months at a property. And that tenure is impacted by the member's experience, your ability to respond to maintenance tickets and requests. And to Suzanne's point, some folks stay for multiple years and probably will stay in indefinitely. So if you're providing good experience, you have the property set up correctly and respond to any issues, you can expect to have really great tenure. Those numbers include some hosts that maybe don't have the best systems in place and they have a move out after several weeks or a month. So it kind of pulls down the average. But I think you could expect 7 to 9 months if you have everything set up and then around a 90% occupancy rate. And that would be true occupancy for all days. And as far as attainable occupancy, which is how well is your property performing for rooms that are available for people to move in, you could probably get between 90 and 95% on that. And at the end of the day, usually it's going to take 2 to 7 days to replace somebody that moves out. So you have that period. But if you only have two replacement periods because your tenure is more than 6 months, you're really not going to lose much more than 2 weeks of revenue time for the property. Yes, and Wilson, you, a lot of questions there. It may be better to meet offline with Suzanne just so we can really dive into all those. But where do we advertise? So we advertise on Google search. If you search rooms for rent, there'll be a PadSplit sponsored listing on social media. So social media, if you're looking for housing and the Meta algorithm picks up on it, you'll be shown an advertisement that says, "Hey, like, have you thought about moving into a pad split?" A lot of times we'll have testimonials from customers. We really like to let our customers tell our story to members more than so than PadSplit. And then what kind of screening do you use to filter? So we have four screening types: the identity verification, the background screening, the rental history screening, and then underwriting their income. And it's something that we try to do our absolute best to always improve and have a great experience for hosts. And you can also do secondary approvals if somebody wants to move into your property. You have a time period where you're able to review their application for PadSplit, and then you can ask them for any additional information if you wanted an ID or photos of their, pay stubs. And then you can also do some personality type questions too, like have you ever lived in a PadSplit? Do you smoke? Like, what is your approach towards dealing with conflicts if you have an issue? So it's kind of both quantitative and qualitative research you can do. Um, and do we have property managers in Seattle? We absolutely do. Yoni and Peter, I believe Yoni's on the call. They're available to manage. We also have several other options as well. So if you wanted to hire a property manager, you could absolutely do that. And then what if the agency wants to pay rent for a resident? That's possible too. If somebody wanted to pay for, call it 6 months of someone's membership dues, we can set that up. My recommendation is be a little bit leery of agencies paying for people because if something happens to the agency or you reach the end of the period where the agency's paying, you may have somebody that is unable to keep paying. So, not that we want to exclude those folks, but just keep in mind that this is a long-term relationship and you want to make sure that somebody's paying for them, they are going to be able to get or have a job that they can continue to pay after the agency's period ends. Because typically agencies are going to pay for 3 to 6 months. Somebody wants to pay in perpetuity. I'd feel good about that too, but I just don't see that come across quite as much.
Andrew, I just wanted to check so we'll have a recorded version of this presentation, right? If people register, then we're going to send them a copy of it if they need to refer to it later.
Absolutely.
Yes, I can also
Yeah.
post it um, in Mari in the thread. I can upload it and post it as well. But if you guys are gonna send it, let me know.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's great. Yeah. And I'll take some more time to research some of the questions that we couldn't answer in detail about the business license and just, general recommendations or resources. I'll kind of share that out on the WAREI chat as well for any kind of follow-up. But again, if you guys have any specific questions on a property, if you're looking at acquisition or a property that you already have, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to kind of schedule a one-to-one with you and we can look over the property and kind of you can ask specific questions to help kind of get an idea if your property is a really good fit.
Thank you, Suzanne. Totally agree. And Jan, that'd be great if you could post that out and maybe we could have one of the AI bots create a bit of a summary too. So if folks don't have the time to watch it all, they can get kind of the TLDR. And then HHHH, would you recommend long-term or short-term stays and why? I would recommend medium and long-term stays. If somebody's only going to stay for a month, you figure you have the 10-day booking fee, so you just lost a third of that revenue. And for that reason, PadSplit requires that you commit to 12 weeks with PadSplit, or you have to pay an additional fee to qualify to move out before that 12-week period. So we're fully oriented around stays that are at least 3 months, and we really like to target that 7 to 9 month occupancy or 7 to 9 month tenure for members. If somebody's looking to rent a room for a week or 2 weeks, PadSplit's not really a good fit. They should probably look at something like an Airbnb because of the way our fee model is set up. And then it also creates more work too, where you have to clean out the room, you have to get it ready. So optimizing for those longer stay periods is absolutely how you want to approach this business.
All right, guys, I'm in Spain and I gotta jump off for dinner, but thank you for co-hosting this with me. Hopefully you guys learned something. And how can folks get a hold of you, Andrew, if they want to reach out? I know Suzanne's put her contact info in the chat, so if you want Suzanne's contact info, you want to get info on your specific pad split, guys, put it in the chat. Go check in the chat and book a Zoom with Suzanne. Andrew, should people reach out to you, or should people just reach out to Suzanne if they want to learn more about this?
Yeah, I would have folks reach out to Suzanne if they want to learn more. And if Suzanne has a question, in around how she should respond to a question the audience asks or anyone asks, she can always reach out to me. But
Yeah.
Suzanne is the go-to and has really learned quite quickly, and we have a robust team in place. She has a sales manager, has myself as well as our support team, so we'll be able to get Suzanne an answer that she can deliver to you. And I'd say 90% of the questions Suzanne's already answered, so she should be a great resource for you. And if you're a vendor and you want to reach out to me, my email is andrew@padsplit.com. I handle more of our vendor network side, met with Yoni about it as well, and we have some presentations we can share. So that's a little bit more my role. And then Suzanne is going to be your PadSplit expert and able to answer your questions or get them answered. So
Awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today, and thanks for logging in and spending an hour with us, you guys. Hopefully, you learned something. If you have, then and you're interested, reach out to these guys. I know I'm excited about running the numbers on my PadSplit. I'm finishing up renovation. It's going to be awesome. So we will send this out on WAREI, the recorded presentation, if you'd like to rewatch it. Otherwise, yeah, thank you guys.
All
Sounds good.
right. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
See you.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.